on the day of his resurrection, after he had appeared to the women at the tomb, Jesus appears to two of his disciples who were walking. They're heading home. They're brokenhearted. Their hope has been shattered. Their friend, the anticipated Messiah, is dead. And Jesus listens to their stories and he speaks to them. From Luke chapter 24, verse 25, it says, Jesus said, "How foolish you are, how slow of heart to believe all that the prophets have spoken. Did not the Christ, the Messiah, have to suffer these things and then enter his glory?" And beginning with Moses and the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. Now that was a 7-mile walk. I wonder what Jesus shared as he told them about the Messiah from all of history. I wonder if he reflected upon the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve's choice to sin, to disobey God and eat the forbidden fruit. Did he remind them of the curse of Satan? Did he say, "I am the one whose heel was bruised, but I've crushed his head"? Did he stay in Genesis 3 and talk about the fact that God took the life of an animal, a sacrifice was made, that they might have skins to cover their guilt and their shame? Did he go to Genesis 12 and remind them of the promise to the great father Abraham, who was old and childless when God made the promise that he'd be made into a great nation, that he'd have many descendants, and his descendants would be a blessing to all the world? Did he remind them of the challenge that God issued to Abraham, the test to take Isaac up on Mount Moriah and offer him as a sacrifice to the Lord, his one and only son? Did he remind him of the conversation where Isaac said, "Dad, I see everything is here ready for the sacrifice, but where is the sacrifice?" And Abraham said, "God will provide." He probably, undoubtedly, reflected upon the Exodus, where God, through the leadership of Moses, delivers the Israelite people from Egyptian slavery. He sets them free. And the last of 10 plagues was death to the firstborn. I'm sure he reminded them that the lamb of Passover, the blood that was applied, the sacrifice that was offered, was a part of their freedom. Did he say that the Messiah had to be that sacrificed lamb, that they might be free from their slavery to sin? I wonder if he talked about the manna and how he reminded them, Jesus said, "I am the bread of life. Eat of me and you shall live eternally." Did he talk about from Leviticus 16, the Day of Atonement, that God would provide a lamb of sacrifice, and there was a goat that was driven into the wilderness, and the Messiah was both of those, that he was the sacrifice for their sin? I'm sure he reminded them of one of their hymns, Psalm 22, which begins, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It goes on to say, "He will be sneered at, his bones will be out of joint, his strength will be gone, his hands and feet will be pierced, his clothes will be divided by lots as he dies." Maybe he quoted from Psalm 69, that the Messiah will cry out in thirst. I'm sure he read from Isaiah 50. In verse 6 says, "He gave his back to be beaten, his cheeks to those who plucked out his beard. He gave himself to mocking and being spat upon." Or Isaiah 52, which says his form would be marred beyond recognition. Or that great psalm, Isaiah 53, "Despised and forsaken, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Pierced for our transgressions, crushed for our iniquities. The punishment that brought us peace was on him. By his wounds we are healed. And he, like a sheep, is silent before its shearers, did not open his mouth. He bore the sins of many." I would assume he reminded them of the details the prophet gave, over 300 prophecies about the Messiah. Things like he would be born in Bethlehem, that he'd be in the tribe of Judah, that he would be of the line of the great King David, that he would escape to Egypt, that he'd be a Galilean, that he'd enter Jerusalem on the back of a foal, that he'd be betrayed by a friend, sold for 30 pieces of silver. The details like the being falsely accused and spat upon and beaten and insulted and mocked, that he'd be buried with the rich, and that like with the sign of the prophet Jonah, on the third day he would live. Christ convincingly argued from all of history that he is the centerpiece of the story, that he is the Messiah, the chosen one of God.